if we look into the Parsha, we see in the Parsha of Bilam, we see political interests. And we see different camps. There were the royal or the chieftains, the leaders, of the Midyanim, and the leaders and the elders of Moav, and the leaders of now let's look at Jordan and Saudi Arabia. That's where this, I understand that's where all of this happened. When the Jewish people were south in the Arabian desert, people were not worried because nobody really needs a desert. It doesn't rain over there. And that happened for 40 years. But when the Jewish people started to take over land north of Jordan, Sichain, and Oig Melech HaBashan, which is the Golan Heights, when they saw the Jewish people take over the land of Sichain, the neighbors to the south, which is modern day Jordan, Moav, so Ammon is a little bit north, I believe, and then Moav was afterwards. Moav got nervous, and they're doing something. They're taking over land, and they got nervous. And their neighbors to the south, which they were always in conflict with, was Midian, but they decided to make peace. And Moav was actually taken over partially by Sichain. So they lost their leadership. They still had family tribes, but they lost their king, and they're now afraid of the Jewish people. They're afraid of Moses. So they did some intelligence work and some profiling, and like what Rashi says, and they went to Midian, their enemy, and said, 1 second, the leader of these people grew in greatness by you. He sort of became great when he was living by you. Tell us about him. We want to do a profile about him to understand how he functions, so maybe we can defend ourselves for this perceived threat. So they were in anxiety. Really, the Jewish people were not a threat to them, but they didn't know that. So they were in a state of anxiety. And when people are in a state of anxiety, they will believe things that are, they won't think rationally. They will believe what they want to believe. And so they went to Midian and they said, oh, this Moses, his power is with speech. And so they said to the leader of Midian, how about, you know how to deal with this? Yes, I do. So he wanted Balak. Balak was like a tribal leader, like the chief, tribal chief, one of the tribal chiefs. So families, Midian was not set up as a king. It was decentralized. There was not a central kingdom. So they offered him, how about you take kingship by us? So that is prestige. So he wanted that prestige. That's what he was motivated by. But he had to deliver. And he had to deliver that he's going to be able to deal with this upcoming perceived threat. And so he said he's going to hire this Bilam, who's a person who has power with his mouth. He knows how to, when he curses, it's effective, and he actually was effective in the war of Sichain. He worked for Sichain before, and they experienced how Sichain was able to take over a lot of their territory just by the power of the curse. So they said to this Balak, who was from Midian, and he said, you be our king, take care of this problem. So he has to deliver. He wants the status. He's motivated by status, and he's motivated by the fact that he has to deliver. So he sort of believed his own propaganda. He believed his own propaganda that he will be able to deliver with this Bilam. And this was his time to show himself. So he brought Bilam down, and obviously, if you read the Parsha, you know that Bilam was not able to do anything against Hashem. Actually, his whole power is based on the fact that he's not doing anything against Hashem, but he thought he was motivated by hatred. So his hatred, he believed his own hatred propaganda, even though he had a lot of technical knowledge, but he didn't look at the end state. Or in fact, the end state was he was burning with hatred. And so when Bilam wasn't able to deliver the first time, because God didn't give him permission to go with them, what happened is the people that were not under the hypnotic spell, the people that were not under a state of anxiety was Midian, because Midian was not under a direct threat. They were living more close to the Saudi Arabian desert at that time. And they weren't under a direct threat, and therefore they weren't under the full anxiety. Therefore, when they saw Bilam was hesitant to deliver, they said, if he's not going to go the first time, it's not going to work. And they went back home. Whereas the chieftains that wanted to believe it's going to be successful, because they were in anxiety, they wanted to believe the propaganda so they could be scammed. They stayed and they believed, yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Yeah, Bilam is going to deliver. Bilam is going to deliver. He never delivered. And then Bilam, even though he was motivated by hatred, but he was also motivated by making a lot of money. And his scheme didn't work. So he had to come up with another scheme to make some money and to save face. He also believed in honor. So honor and money, these things mattered a lot. He was motivated by those also. So he wanted to save face, and he ill-advised ways to spiritually harm the Jewish people. Of course, it didn't work out well for him. It didn't work out well for anybody. But the punishment that came onto these nations afterwards, it was directed on Midian, not so much as Moav, because ultimately Moav was under a state of anxiety. Their perceived threat was based on things that actually happened. So therefore, a grudge is not kept against them as much. Now, what they should have done is they should have been accommodating. They should have been good hosts to their cousins. The Jewish people are their cousins. So therefore, since they weren't accommodating, they weren't good hosts. Therefore, the men who were responsible of being good to invite people to their houses, then they're not allowed to become part of the Jewish people. Whereas the females, their role would be to stay at home, so that they're not held responsible. But Midian from Arabia, they weren't under threat. They're held responsible for the sins that they brought about to the Jewish people, especially the women, and it was none of their business to get them. And then also they even made it worse. They brought in idolatry. They tempted the men from the tribe of Shimon to serve idolatry, which, even if you're going to tell me that they wanted, see, they went far and beyond. It's not like they were just following orders. They were creative on their own on much they can compound the damage to the Jewish people. And they were absolutely held responsible for what they did. More so than Moab. And so that's a little look of what was going on in the story of Bilam. And we have lessons for nowadays. Recognize that people have different interests. And it could be that somebody with hatred is partnering with somebody that has interest to have prestige. People are just protecting their positions. They're doing bad things, but they don't have hatred. They're just collaborating because of their position. Not only they're collaborating, they are leading in order to have a position of prestige. They're held responsible for the bad things that they do, especially the things that were not justified. As a leader, a person is justified to try and protect his people, but to make other people sin, he went beyond what a responsible leader would do. That was already treachery, and he was held responsible for that. And there are other people that are motivated by hatred, and other people motivated by money and by honor. And we see from the Parsha that everybody is held responsible for their part in what they do. And when there's a true excuse for why they're doing what they're doing, so we see that God leaves them off the hook. But it has to be a sincere and complete truth to the fact that the fact that they honestly were trying to do the best thing. It wasn't treacherous, and they weren't being devious, and they weren't being hateful. They were just trying to do the best under that situation. So then God says, okay, well, that part is not that bad. But did they live up to the expectations as a relative? No. So a relative is held on higher esteem when a relative has a certain responsibility to behave to their relatives in an appropriate way. And when a person doesn't live up to their expectations as a relative, they're held forever, for eternity. They're held responsible for that. Yeah, that's some lessons from this week's Parsha.